This is gonna be the long version of how to cut these taillights open. Not just a little bit of information, but like a whole bunch of it. You're gonna want something to cover up your arms if you're cutting, because all these little plastic bits just nail all up and down your arms, your neck, your face, all of that is gonna get hit as well. So you're gonna want to have some sort of a decent face mask. Other things, just simple stuff. A quick little screwdriver to get the stuff out. This is gonna help us get any extra little plastic that we need, just a quick little blade. And then we're gonna use a flathead to just wedge in between the cut marks. Most important of all, we've got a Dremel with an extension, and that allows us to get lots of access to the tight areas, whereas something bulkier like this heavy duty Dremel isn't gonna really do nearly as good a job because we just can't fit it in there. And same thing, the body of that guy is gonna be bigger, so it's gonna be difficult to get where we can with this. And that blade is the winner. That's the one that is gonna give us a nice clean cut. And every so often you gotta replace these things to make sure that you are getting the best cut possible. You ready, sir? Wait a second, are you even subscribed to the channel yet? Hit that subscribe and sign up for notifications so that you don't miss these dope how-to videos. All right, let's go back. So let's talk about what I just did. First off, I should have zipped this thing up because now I've just got everything all over me and that was stupid. But if you notice, as I cut, I keep my thumb in place on here. And so what happens is if I cut all the way through the plastic and I don't have my thumb there, I could easily go down and hit the inside, nick that little part of the lens, and that's gonna be no good. So I'm holding that kind of like as the guide, and I just kind of push it right into my thumb, and it makes it easy to use my left hand to control where the blade's gonna be at. My right hand, I just try to keep it as still as I can. So that's that. Next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut along an edge that's gonna give me enough exposure of the bezel that it will lift past this black section here that I'm leaving intact, but that's melted to the lens. So if I cut too close to that, it's gonna become super fragile, and then that is going to be breaking and causing issues, as well as anything that happens to this will show along this edge right there. So it took a lot of broken Genesis coupe taillights to figure that one out. Anyway, I'm gonna work my way around the whole part, and as I go, I'll typically make 3 passes. So I'll go 1 to lay the track down, and then the second pass will bring more material off, and then I'll do a 3rd pass, and I'll kind of work my way back and forth and get through the plastic. So there's pretty much gonna be the top or the bottom, the top, and then the sides, all done kind of individually. The only section on this WRX light that's different than most is that instead of messing with this bracket, I'm just gonna cut right along this edge right here. I'll take it all the way down there, and then I'll actually bypass that screw. So I'm gonna come right to the top of it, and then I'm gonna turn the Dremel, and that's why this little particular setup is important, and I'm gonna just skirt right around there. Everything else is full perimeter, just going all the way to the edge. So, all right, let's keep going. suggest before you do anything else, a smart move is to just go through and knock all the crap off of this, get onto the ground. When you're doing the next steps, it doesn't help when every 5 seconds you find another pocket of little plastic debris to fall into where you're working with and kind of make it hard to see. So I like to cut and then dust everything off as best I can, set it down, shake the stuff off of you because you typically have stuff on your face, your hands, it's uncomfortable. Don't keep working while you're all distracted by that stuff. Just set it down, broom everything to the side, and then you'll get to go back through and look at everything kind of with fresh eyes and see if there's any spots that haven't let go that you have to go through with the blade and the screwdriver. You don't want to force anything because it'll snap easy. So let's clean up and then we'll go to the next step. Other thing I didn't even talk about is the shop vac. Where's the shop vac? That little guy will save your life, but it's not super important. Clean up however you can, just make sure that you clean as you go. So I looked at the backside, I looked everywhere where I trimmed. There's a couple little spots that I left, and sometimes it's a good idea to not 100% cut all the way through 100% of the way around before you kind of go through and break a couple little anchor sections. And the reason for that is just that if this isn't held in place by that plastic that we just cut, then it's just gonna fall right inside of this lens right here. If you have those little anchor sections, it kind of forces it to go back in the position that it should be in, as opposed to having a big fat gap on this side and no gap on that side. So if that makes any sense, that's why I leave a couple little spots. If you look up close though, you can see most of the area around there is really wide open, and it'll actually move a little bit right now. So you don't want to wiggle it too much because that can make marks on the inside of this clear lens. So this part's kind of important that you're super careful about how you move everything. So what I do know for sure is that I have a little anchor section right there of plastic, as well as right here I have a little bit. What I don't want to do is, before I cut it with the blade, just come through here and twist it, because if it's too strong of an anchor, it's going to find the weak point, which in the case of right here, that weak point might be this upper section, and we don't want to break that. So I'm going to actually hit it with the blade a little bit first, score it, weaken it up a little bit, and then do the same thing on this side before I even check to see how strong that section is. And that's just kind of a precaution to take no matter what. All taillights are going to be similar to this, that if the internals have like a little housing, a bezel, anything at all, then you're going to want to make sure that you do as good a job as you can at keeping this housing intact. So that I actually just cut through. It didn't even need to use the flathead at all. So now I'm going to come to this last little section right here, and I know that this is going to be the biggest pain point on these taillights because it's actually the section where the bezel is going to be held down. So I'm just cutting it. You can use other tools. We have the ultrasonic cutter that we use. I figure everybody's got access to a blade, so I'll show you how to do it with that. And then now that I've weakened it a bit, I can keep going at it for a while, or I can come through and check it now with the screwdriver to see if that's weakened it enough. So I can see it wants to give up. So I just twisted just a tiny little bit until you heard it snap free. And now the next step is just simply twisting out the bulbs, because they're gonna kind of hold everything in place a bit too. So just twist those guys out, and now we're going to pull out our 5 screws that are holding the back to the internal chrome pieces. And there are little rubber and metal washers on these things that will come out, so make sure you don't lose them, because that's actually sealing the light as well on the holes where the screws go through. So I try to back them out as much as I can and then just bend them to the side, and everything comes up as one. Alright, check out everything besides that one. And now let's see if it all lifts out. Super important right here too is that we don't give too much play to this part, so we don't end up scratching the internals. And if there's anything that hasn't let go right here up at the top, we'll find out right now. Seems like everything's cool, but it doesn't 100% want to let go. So we just have to find out why that is. And never ever force anything, because now that it's hinging like this, it's got a pretty strong weak point. Okay, so there's one little tiny anchor of plastic that I have right there that I didn't see ahead of time. And so if you can see in that little gap, I'm just going to run the blade along, light pressure, and that was it. Okay, so as you can tell, that section right there was able to come into contact with that clear plastic. So we don't want to leave a bunch of scratches from just like ripping it around. And then the last part that we need to get free on this, a lot of times when you cut, you can't necessarily get that all the way out. So in the case of what you guys should do, I would suggest you can either sit and work your way through with this guy and just kind of work your way through until you've got that little piece of plastic out of the way, or you can carefully wiggle it out, which I'll show you how to do right now. And same thing with the other part. You want to be really careful. You also want to decide if this part's not going to be painted, you won't want to wear gloves right now because you're about to make a bunch of fingerprints all over it if you intend on keeping it chrome. Yeah, so it's just kind of pulled out from the other side. Sometimes it can be really wedged in there, but in this case, we don't want to mess with those plastic parts because those we want to stay perfectly unblemished. So we're going to set everything to the side for now, and then we're going to go blast this off with air to make sure that we get all of this debris out before we move to the next steps. This next step should have been done first, but it wasn't, so no big deal. There's a little piece of foam that you got to remove, and it will reveal a little hidden clip that holds the connector to the circuit board on the inside. So Jack's disconnecting that. He's going to unplug it, and then at this point now we can finally remove that inner panel that has the circuit board attached to that little clip. Okay, so with that unplugged, we can drop the circuit board off the back just by pulling 3 little screws. And now we're going to have 2 different pieces that we're going to have to mess with. We're going to have to remove the clear lenses off of that internal bezel, as well as this piece that had the circuit board attached to it prior. Alright, so these clear lenses have little tabs that stick through the bezel, and then they're melted down into place in that little circular section right there. And so what we have to do is either come through with our flush cutter, or with a razor blade, or in our case, we would normally just use the ultrasonic cutter. But in this case, we just wanted to show what most people have access to. So we cut those tabs, we pop the little things out of place, and now we've got that lower lens removed. Now I should say, you only need to remove that if you intend on painting the inside black. Otherwise, you can skip that step and move right to cutting the same little pieces off of the main C-bar clear lens. You can see Jack here messing with the 2 different tabs that are melted into place, and then he moves on to clips that you just have to squeeze down on with the needle nose pliers that he's got. There's 3 of those. Get those all pushed down into place, and then you are good to remove that last lens. Alright, after all that work, the last thing you want to do is take out those plastic pieces and let something happen to them. So after you cut and pry this last little piece off, you're going to want to make sure that you put that as well as all of your other pieces into a container that's dust free so that you don't ever have to clean these things, because if you wipe them, they're gonna scratch. Let us know in the comments if you have any questions about this procedure and if there's anything we can do to make it a little easier for you. You want some free taillights customized by FlyRyde? Then like this video, share it around, and let us know that you did that. Shoot over a comment on Instagram, on Facebook, anywhere that you find us, and let us know that you're sharing our content and you might be the big winner.